Singapore is known for its high GDP and love of shopping, and yet many Singaporeans don't have a good grasp of financial literacy. Two young graduates saw this problem and decided to demystify money and help people make smart financial decisions. Today I'm going to meet Audrey Tan, one half of the duo that founded PlayMoolah, to see how her business is getting along. My name is Neil Moore, and this could only be Can and Think Big. Thank you again for joining us on Can and Think Big. Appreciate it. I'm going to start, as I always do, by asking you how it all began. What was your big idea?
So, PlayMoolah was started back in 2010 officially. We prototyped, the idea much earlier in 2008 when Min and myself, my co-founder, we found ourselves in the midst of the financial crisis. And as a young person, being in the US and being in the middle of this financial crisis, the whole notions of how do you manage your money kind of came up, and it began ringing a lot for us as young people. And then as I look back on my own journey, I realized that as a young person, I was taught the basics about money, like savings, budgeting, but that was kind of it. And then we started talking to our peers in the US, and we realized that, hey, this was a problem that was not only related to me, but peers and the people around us were all facing the same challenge. And that was when we said, okay, could we essentially do something that was meaningful, that could create impact in impacting the lives of children or their parents at a young age.
Actually, you meeting your business partner Min was a total accident that happened in Silicon Valley. So tell me about that, because I think happy accidents are an awful big part of a lot of success.
The caveat to that was that as part of the whole selection process, I was one of the first few to be placed, in the program. But I received a call, I think it was about maybe 2 to 3 weeks before departure, and I was told that the company who was about to hire me could not hire me anymore. And I was like, okay, so what was really going on? And then I found out that the company didn't receive funding. And so what happened was Min and a couple of friends at that time essentially said, why don't we try this company that we're working with? And the company turns out to be quick, and I was very kind of blessed in a sense to find my way in a company and then on my way to the valley.
So why the name PlayMoolah? How did you come up with that?
This was Min's idea. It was funny because we were brainstorming and we were thinking, and then finally she woke up one day and she said, we're gonna call it Moolah.
Divine inspiration.
And maybe, right? But Moolah just simply means money.
Yeah.
And so we went online and we were like, okay, can we just buy the domain name Moolah? And then it turns out that it was actually bought by a gambling site. So we were like, okay, we can't call it, Moolah, right? And we realized that, okay, if we wanted to appeal to children, how about, PlayMoolah? And it's an embodiment of the company because we use game mechanics to design for behavioral action and behavioral change.
So did you start the company in the US or did you start it in Singapore?
So we started it in the US.
Oh wow. Okay, so how was that?
It was fun. It was really, really fun. Having said that, having been in the US for the year in 2008, it was tough times. You could visibly see the poverty that were in the streets and in the homes. Our friends were sharing with us that they were taking on their parents' debt as well as young people. So it was good in the sense that we got to be in the grounds, just really understanding the challenges that people were experiencing and facing, and trying to essentially define certain solutions that would really help them.
So I'm thinking it must be quite nice to set up a company with a friend, with a peer of yours. But I'm guessing also it was difficult for most people. It is. So do you think there was any unique challenges you faced as very young entrepreneurs?
Well, I would say that both of us, having had started our own small businesses before and have always worked with startups, naturally came into this position as co-founders as something that was very, I would say, organic. So we had the privilege of, running businesses and working with startups before, that I think we were basically on common ground. So it was easy to get started. The passion was kind of, similar. Min's, passionate about education. I'm passionate about kids. And I think the common denominator that bounded us was, technology. And I think being the heart of Silicon Valley and being in a place where you have like-minded people, it was easy to, just gel. I mean, having said that, we as founders, we face our own challenges as well. To knowing that there's some sense of, I would say, security and stability within the company.
So your first project was PlayMoolah, which is targeted at kids. So how did you guys develop and grow that game to the point that it's at today? What were the main steps for you?
It started very early on with simply building a prototype, and when we first started, it was as scrappy as paper and pen and screen flows, just basically mocking up what each screen would entail and how the user journey would play out. And with that, we took it with our development team and essentially allowed them to prototype. And at that time, it was like a flash prototype, which was, a long time ago. So it was all about, prototyping it, scrappy, putting it out in the market, and then testing it, and then getting feedback and iterating. So we did this, for about, I would say 6 months, and 6 months to about 8 months. And thereafter, we planned for our launch, and we launched the first product, the Moolahverse for kids and parents in the US. And that was, one of the first milestones that we've had.
And how did that go?
It went well, I would say. We had very well received feedback. And as a business, it's all about how do we essentially become sustainable? How do you essentially create a business model around the product that you're selling? And then we realized that the US was one market, but at the same time, Singapore offered a market potentially that allowed parents and kids to buy in, to this vision of educating their children about their finances early on. And so we saw that there was opportunity even here locally as well. And we started, speaking with a couple of schools as well as financial institutions. And we were fortunate in the sense that we managed to find product market fit, with one of the financial institutions here. So that really kind of laid down the foundations of a bigger launch here in Singapore locally. And that was kind of a spiral and growth, I would say, for the business.
So following the success of PlayMoolah, you went on to develop Moolah. So what is Moolah, and how do you decide that the time is right to take the next step?
Moolah is a decision-making simulator that allows you to play out your life's big decisions over time. So it's real-life scenarios and real-life goals. And what we do is that we fast-forward the consequences of your decisions, like upfront. So a young person can play the role of, say, for example, an engineer, a teacher, and they could see all their life's big decisions being played out over time. And so why Moolah and how we started. So see, the vision of PlayMoolah has always been to build a positive relationship to money. And we've always known that from the start, it's all about starting with children and parents, but it's always been part of the vision also to do young adults. And so we had the idea for young adults, I would say even a year before we launched the product. So all these seeds of innovation had already started to germinate. So we knew that the time was right when we found, again, a next customer who pulled, the product and the demand out of us, that, this was the appropriate time to launch this in the market.
So with them taking on some of your previous responsibility, how has your role changed now? What do you do now that's different to perhaps the early days?
What is different? Let's see. Well, I would say, one, inspiring the team to, be more effective in the way that they do things. Previously I would be doing it, right? But I think inspiring and thinking and having new perspectives to how to do a similar, task differently. I feel like that's one thing that I have learned in this time. Being out there speaking to customers, I kind of try and bring the team along together to have them take leadership as well of some of the responsibilities around speaking to new customers or to new stakeholders in our company. So that's something that I've started doing a lot more now.
So the last question for this part of Can I Think Big is about, as an entrepreneur, understanding the point at which an idea is ready to be implemented. What advice do you have for young entrepreneurs about making that decision?
For me, one thing that's important is starting with the need. What is the need that you're solving in the market, right? Is it like a me too? Or are you truly solving someone else's, challenge? Because I think one thing that I've learned is that if it's just a me too, or it's a product that doesn't really solve a need, it's a nice to have, you will end up finding a challenge to monetize it, in time. So the key thing is, how do you essentially create, business models that can be validated? I think that's the key thing. And the thing is that sometimes we'll never know. In the early stages, we've always sat in a room thinking, okay, maybe we could do this, maybe we could monetize the banks, much later, but we never realized that it was so soon. And we realized that we only had to try and do it, and then we'll know. So to some of these entrepreneurs who are potentially thinking of doing something, I mean, scope it in a small prototype, test it, iterate it, and validate. I think that's the key thing.